Today on Engine Power, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the legendary 426 Big Block Hemi. We'll show you its history and where it's going by building an INDY cylinder head 572 Hemi.
Welcome to Engine Power and a show for the Chrysler lovers. Today, we're not alone.
That's one of our aluminum blocks.
INDY cylinder heads Russ FLAGLE and Ken Laziri, the Hemi specialist, are here to help us celebrate 50 years of the iconic engine, nicknamed the Elephant. We're going to build a 572 cubic inch Super Street Hemi to continue the legend, and they brought the hardware to do it. But first, take a look at where it all began and where it's headed. The 426 Hemi debuted in 1964 with one sole mission: to win races. Years earlier, drag racer Tom Hoover had led a group of engineers who modified Chrysler's RB Block 426 Max Wedge with the company's early Hemi head design. The result? An unprecedented 8 NASCAR wins for Richard Petty in his 426 Hemi Plymouth. Small wonder that rival protest led to a NASCAR ban on Hemis for the 1965 season. So Mopar sent the 426 race Hemi to the drag strip. Don Garlits used them in NHRA quarter-mile competition and was the first racer to break the 200-mile-an-hour barrier. In 1968, Ronnie Sox, the greatest 4-speed driver in history, dropped a 426 Hemi into his Barracuda Fastback. As a result, he easily won the Superstock Eliminator Championship. We were fortunate enough to see Ronnie and his old CUDA match racing Bob Reed in St. Louis just a few years before his passing.
A lot of the kids have never even seen a Hemi. They've heard of them. And so that's one reason. That thing is a legend in its own, the engine is. They have loosened up the rules a lot since we ran back in '68. You can do a lot more to these engines now than you could back in those days. Back in those days, we had to run the stock intake manifolds and all that. And you can see this one's all tricked up. It's got a Dick Landy intake on it, and it's got a lot of high-tech stuff in it, and it's pretty bulletproof.
The best place to experience the heritage of race Hemi cars is a nostalgia racing event. At this Bakersfield, California Hot Rod Reunion, fans could get up close and personal with some of the most famous Hemi-powered race cars of the 60s and 70s, like Don Garlits' famed Swamp Rat and Tommy Ivo's Barnstormer, first car to run a 7-second ET. Who could not get excited over seeing and hearing nitro-burning Hemis at the traditional Cackle Fest? In 1966, Chrysler made its 426 Street Hemi available as an option for B-body Dodges and Plymouths. Less compression than the race version and a milder cam, still the Elephant motor was rated at 425 horsepower. Chrysler discontinued the 426 Hemi in 1971, but there was no stopping Hemi hysteria. At events like the Mopar Nationals, you could see them blown in 7-second race cars or as part of $1 million restorations. There were only 9 Hemi CUDA 4-speed convertibles made in '70 and '71. This lucky guy owns the first and last ones made. When Mopar launched the latest generation in 2003, it was a welcome big hit. Although loaded with technical changes and flatter and more complex heads, it's still a Hemi at heart, and part of the legacy that began in the glory days of engine power. So, happy birthday, Hemi.
Up next, we start the build of a 572 Hemi with the guys that are keeping the legend alive.
So, now you know the history of the Hemi, and here's why we asked these guys to celebrate with us.
Well, in high school, my brother and I, Fred, we were actually amateur drag racers at best. And we just worked on our heads. And that coming weekend, we could run faster, virtually every weekend. And I got to the point where I would just sell heads right off my car. There was times when I sold the whole engine because I just go make another one.
And that's the humble beginnings of Indy cylinder heads. With the help of Ken Lazeri, their passion for the 426 Hemi grew, and they became the go-to source for Mopar aftermarket engine and parts. So where did they get the idea to offer a big-inch Hemi crate engine? When GM released the 572 big block crate engine, a new standard was set. You could be playing with 720 reliable horsepower for around $15,000, but not everyone wants a Chevy. So Indy Cylinder Head released their own heavy hitter crate engine, and they call it the 572 Super Street Hemi. Now it's an engine that'll run on either race or pump gas, produces over 750 horsepower, and it'll pull your ride down the quarter-mile in 9 seconds. Plus, it's guaranteed to give you bragging rights over all your Chrysler buddies. The starting point is this Mopar Performance cast iron Siamese bore block. Now, unlike the original, it gladly accepts larger bores due to the Siamese design. Now, the block weighs 35 to 40 pounds more than a stock piece, and that extra weight translates into a much stronger block. Now, ARP studs will hold in the first 4 6-bolt caps and the rear 2-bolt cap. If weight is an issue and you have special preferences, Indy offers their own Hemi block in aluminum form. Now with a 4.5-inch bore, the block weighs 133 pounds. You have several options such as a stock oil pan rail width or widened, raised or standard cam location, and several choices of cam bearings from roller to Babbitt. And all 5 mains are cross-bolted with 1/2-inch hardware. It can also go from 426 inches all the way up to 655. The backbone to our Hemi build is a forged 4340 Eagle crankshaft. Now this thing has a 4.5-inch stroke and weighs in right at 72 pounds. Now we decided to order ours with their ESP armor finish. It's a process that removes stress risers from its surface and actually strengthens it up. Now it'll also reduce oil temperature and bearing wear. They claim it'll also add up to 30 horsepower in a big block engine. Russ, what do you guys do to get the block ready for assembly?
At Indy Cylinder Head, we try to do as many things as we can in the CNC process so that we know that everything is done perfectly, time after time after time. One of the things we do is we relieve the bottom of the cylinders for stroke clearance. Depending on what crankshaft and what rod combination, we have different stroke clearances, so that by the time our engine builder gets it, he's ready to put it together. What we're looking at here is the 2 cuts that we put in on the CNC to clear the connecting rod on the crankshaft.
Indy supplied the main bearings for the rotating assembly. Now, making sure the saddles are clean, they will be installed dry, followed by the upper half of the rear main seal. The cam bearings will get lubed now with Royal Purple Assembly Lube, since this is the only time to access them. Now we can slick up the rest of the main bearings and the rear main seal. Our crank is next. Take your time setting it in place. You don't want to nick a journal on the main stud. The first main to go on houses the thrust bearing. It will be seated first by tightening the nuts. Then Ken will force it front to back to check the thrust clearance. 6.5 to 7 thousandths is right on the money. The rest of the caps are marked for their location and direction. With ARP Ultra Torque on all their fasteners, torque the inner studs to 90 foot-pounds and the outers to 25.
Rear main seal leaks have always been a problem on all big block Chryslers. A lot has to do with this die cast holder. It just fits with a lot of slop. When you go to install the side seals, they always want to walk up on you. We have just flat fixed the problem. We have a billet aluminum seal holder. All the dimensions are correct. Our side seals twist in, lock, and they wrap around. Pull tension on it, slide it in place. Not only does it stop the leak, but it's just so easy to install. You don't have to fight with the side seals.
And that's why we love these guys. Stay with us. There's more to learn.
The passion lives on, and the power comes from the heads.
We're back and ready to get the rotating assembly wrapped up. To make the connection from the crank to the piston are a set of Eagle's forged 4340 H-beams. They have a shot peen finish and accept a floating pin. They're attached to a set of custom forged diamond pistons made to Indy specs. Spiral locks will hold the two together. They have a total seal 1/16, 1/16, 3/16 ring pack and an anti-detonation groove. Ken will wipe motor oil down the first couple inches of the bores before filling these 4.5-inch bores. Engine building is in a class of its own. Watching Ken and Russ put this rotating assembly together is the perfect example of doing it the right way. No metal or brass hammers to seat anything, lube only where needed, and nothing has to come back apart. ARP 8740 bolts will be torqued to 63 foot-pounds. The camshaft is a solid roller from Comp. It has a cool background too. The specs are identical to the GM 572R cam. Lift at the valve is 650 on the intake and 655 for the exhaust. Duration at 50 is 272 and 280, and it has a 108-degree centerline. Making the connection is an INDY cylinder head double row billet timing set with adjustable keyways. Ken degrees every camshaft he installs. This is to verify the information on the cam card is what the cam specs really are, and the crank to cam timing is dead on. Now the timing set bolts can be torqued and the cam button installed and covered up with a stamped steel timing cover. To finish the front, an ATI balancer that has a 7¼ inch diameter and OE dimensions to work with any pulley system. With ARP bolts in place, including 4 inside the valley, we're ready for the heads. Russ, these heads look awesome. What made them the choice to go on this 572?
Well, this is the new head that we developed that looks more like a standard Chrysler head. It's our 426 SR head, which stands for stock replacement, because there was more and more people, Chrysler people, that just wanted a head that was exactly stock. A lot of those older cars were built with air grabber hoods and strange things in our minds, but to them it meant everything. So we went back and made a head that was exactly the same on the outside with better airflow characteristics and would lend it more to our project.
These SR heads have the same 170cc combustion chambers as stock, but the valves were cut to allow clearance for that more aggressive cam. Together, they can generate up to 800 horsepower. Not enough? Meet the hypo.
Well, Mike, we also have an upgraded head that we can put on the 572. With the different camshaft, with the different head, it's worth as much as 100 horsepower. It still has the same size combustion chamber, 170, but it has a 2400 intake valve and a 1940 exhaust valve. Now, how you accomplish this is we rotate the exhaust valve 2 degrees away from the intake valve, but what that accomplishes is that distance right there. And that allows you to run a camshaft with 800 thousandths lift.
And just like these SRs, all stock components still fit, like the rocker shafts. Now make sure the orientation is correct or they won't go on. The Chromoly rocker arms are a 1:6 ratio on the intake and a 155 on the exhaust. Those 4 unique studs are threaded into the head from the bottom. Now these get tightened by hand to Ken's preference. These are torqued to 50 foot-pounds with a final pass of 70. A milling high-volume pump will lubricate the vitals. An internal pickup will screw into the Mopar exclusive adapter. And before we close up the bottom end, a little more oil on the timing chain and a few squirts on the rod's beams, which will run into the oiling hole and pre-lube the wrist pin. The Mylodon windage tray is next. It accepts larger strokes, so no modifications were needed, followed by a Mylodon 8-quart pan. It fits 65 through 76 muscle cars, making it extremely universal. With assembly lube in the pushrod cups, the rockers can be flipped over and the valves can be lashed to 20 thousandths on the intake and the exhaust. Before we cover all that up, we want to prime the engine and verify oil is making its way to the top. Now, CompCam's valve train assembly spray will protect all this during fire up. The valve covers on a Hemi are the crowning jewel in my opinion. These are Mopar Performance's cast aluminum covers that let you know exactly what you're looking at. We're going to dyno this engine with 2 different intakes. The first is a race Hemi cross ram. We sourced this one from A&A Transmissions, who is manufacturing them. It comes with all the linkage, brackets, and hardware. Now it gets tightened through access holes in the intake surface. Once torqued, these cover plugs screw in to cover them up. To feed this elephant, twin Holley 77 carbs that are mirrored images of each other and period correct for the cross ram. When we come back, they'll be squirting.
Nothing sounds like a Hemi. Coming up, it's dyno time.
On a system like this, you've got to have everything plumbed exactly right.
Russ and Ken made short order of this build,
It should be ready to rock.
and it's time to bring another Hemi into history.
When you hear one of these start up and they make noise, you're just so proud of it, and it just really just brings more enthusiasm back into the whole thing.
Kenny, how many engines have you built?
Chrysler engines, this is number 3018.
So he's learned a few tricks along the way.
You don't want to accidentally start the engine up at 60 degrees of timing. You can do a lot of damage. You need to be as close as 35 degrees as possible. What you do is you set the engine at top dead center, you line it up right at number 1, you add a ½ inch of timing, lock it down, you're within a degree where you need to be.
With a quick check for leaks and another for timing, how close was Ken?
It's 1 degree off.
That means we're ready
Get us a good one here.
and taking it straight to 6,500.
Good one.
That's
Man,
a
that
good one.
thing, it makes me jump up in my seat.
You could feel it.
713, 697.
Not bad. Time to make some more power.
This intake won't make much more. It's all about that Hemi look.
Sounds good, looks good. There's no other American-made V8 that looks like this Hemi engine that they put in a lot of cars. It's just the mystique of the whole thing.
722, 702.
Pretty good. That's where it should be.
That's right on the money with this intake setup.
Let's change the setup then.
Russ is anxious to show us more power, so he brought this, a dual plane intake with a Dominator flange. Originally designed by the best superstock racer of all times, Arlen Vanke, who was hired by Chrysler to test their performance technology. On top is a 1050 CFM Holley double pumper.
Let's do it. That sounds good.
Yeah.
754, 685.
Just a nice straight line all the way up.
Very clean.
Tell you what, nothing sounds better than a Hemi.
Yeah, oh, you got that right.
Sure do.
Nothing feels better than it. I mean, it's in your feet, it's in the floor, it's everywhere.
You can actually sit here and feel it.
Yeah.
Feel it. Yeah.
That's awesome. And after a minor jet change, here goes another.
That's it.
762,
That's what we're looking
677. What a graph. And I mean, it's carrying the power way out too, even from the peak. And here goes our last run.
Nice and smooth.
764, 687.
Look at that torque. It wants it even further back.
Almost to 7,000.
I can't get over how far it holds the power there. And I mean, it's just flatlined across the graph.
Just good street motor. That ought to make a good one.
Man, if it's pulling you this hard sitting at a desk, that thing's gonna be fun.
And it'll be real drivable
With a
also.
single carburetor, awesome.
Yep, very nice. Indy offers tons of parts as well as several crate engines. One like ours is available to you in 2 ways. Disassembled, which saves $1,000, or assembled and dyno to your door for around 17,000 bucks.
This engine increases the value of any car it goes into.
No cake cliche needed here. These Hemis speak for themselves. This one is off to its new owner in Italy, and another to Sweden. This one is up for grabs, along with many more to follow.
As long as we're around, we're still going to have Hemi engines.
No doubt. See you next time.